All right, another action-packed with Dr. Jason Pickard on the Pickett. I think it's Pickett. Still on the stand. This is day 5, part 4. If you had watched part 4, oh man, it was action-packed. He is still on direct. Man, this was devastating to me, devastating to the defense. Oh my God. He declares her not insane. Now, this is his opinion, right? His opinion after evaluating her. And this guy is so thorough. Dr. Pickett, man. It's incredible. He has destroyed Dr. Clark, which was brought up by the defense. Just destroyed everything he said in an amazing way to where, wow. Like I said, he's still on direct where I left off. He says that while he was interviewing Carly, her attorney, Todd, which is in this picture here, was accompanied Carly. And of course, she's asking him, is this, I guess, normal procedure, whatever? And he's like, well, sometimes they are. And most of the time, he's called by the defense to evaluate these people that claim that they have some kind of problems, mental problems. So he says that he wrote in it, he said it was odd, I guess I'm paraphrasing my little brain gathering, that Miss Todd was giving Carly, was leading her in the interview. It was a bomb, like a bomb went off. And of course, she's taking notes frantically. I don't think she's going to cross-examine him, which I wish she was. I'm thinking it's the other guy because he was the one standing up. Not that I'm a court expert, but I think the guy, I don't even know his name, the bald-headed guy on the defense team, he's the one that's been asking what page, and he's been up talking. So I'm assuming that he's going to get up and be crossing Dr. Pickett. He was saying that, which is going to be action-packed because now the defense has got to get up, and I would think they're going to have to try to regain some momentum on, like, because if I was the jury, man, this is huge. That she's leading Carly into saying certain things or not saying certain things and things like this, but leading her. And she's not supposed to do that. Right? He was also saying, the doctor was saying that when he'd asked her questions about her mental status and this and that, she was giving textbook perfect responses. Now, he was saying that when he interviews people with these mental disorders, that they have kind of a tough time. I don't know if it's a tough time, but he can tell. Like, this guy is smart. He can tell, because of the way these people are talking. That Carly's just giving these textbook answers. Like for instance, he's asking her about her racing thoughts and stuff. And she just says, like an ocean, Or he said, he had asked her something else, and she said, well, I feel like I was like right here, and I was kind of like watching myself or whatever. I mean, she was giving textbook answers by his opinion. The prosecution also established that with this witness that he feels like the dad didn't have bipolar because the defense is trying to say, well, he's abusive to Carly, he has bipolar, So Carly has pretty much inherited this. Okay, so that's gone. He also went over that out of all the information he had gathered, that, and I had been saying it a billion times, Carly didn't come up with all of this stuff, that her having blackouts, her having hearing voices and all this stuff didn't come up until after the murder. So he was saying that he doesn't take it much stock, which I thought was like, boom, another bomb just dropped in. He did not take much stock in the after the murder when she tells Dr. Clark all of this stuff. He said he didn't take much stock in it, and it was powerful. It was powerful. I thought it was just devastating to the defense. He also said that he had, now I think he had 8 references of him, how he's coming to his conclusions, that he's referencing other things and putting them in his notes. He said there was too numerous and it was exhausting for him to keep writing why he's coming to what conclusions and what he's referencing. So he is putting references in his notes. It was just 85 pages, people. He said Dr. Clark had very little references of notes on how he came to his conclusion that Carly was insane at the time and that Carly has all these mental problems, which I thought was devastating to the prosecution. And again, like I said, this guy, he came off as warm, likable, confident in a good way, very knowledgeable, and speaking to where somebody like me can understand what he is saying. Let's see, what else do I have in my notes? Yeah. And her diary. You know, they talked a lot about her diary, that he felt like it was more theatrical and stuff like that. But he said it also gave an insight into her thoughts. So I think I've pretty much covered all of this. Yeah, I'm a day behind. Today is Wednesday. I didn't get anything done on the court yesterday. I had a bunch of stuff to do, and I had to clean out the car. I vacuumed the car, did a bunch of stuff like that because it was a mess. We got a bunch of leaves falling here, right? And it just gets all in the car, and it was a mess. So I didn't get anything done as far as videos and working and doing this. And I was looking forward to getting back because, like I said, I am like, I want to see Cross on Dr. Pickett, man. Because it was just that, it was like blow after blow after blow on punching the whole case that the defense has for her, that she's insane, she has blackouts, she hears voices, all of this, it's all been dismantled as far as I can hear and see in the trial so far, unless they come up and start showing me some evidence, because he said he did not take stock in her claiming all of this stuff after the murder. So let's dive right in. Let's get started.
I want to walk you through the second diagnosis that Dr. Clark gave to Carly. Was based on her, it says, several year history of auditory hallucinations occurring quite frequently. Dr. Pickett, I want to know, in your review of the records, was there anything to indicate before Carly was arrested on March the 19th, 2024, that there were any auditory hallucinations?
I believe in her journal, she did write one time about the voices, as I spoke to earlier, about hearing them ravenously, and thank goodness, physical confrontation was not realistic. So yes, she did mention it there. I was highly skeptical of that because it seemed more theatrical and making light of something that, as I've seen patients who really suffer from this, they are haunted by it. It is torturous to them, and they do not describe it as quite silly, and they do not trivialize it.
You were present in the courtroom when Dr. Gugliano testified earlier, right?
Yes.
And she said it was actually quite rare for someone. Carly had reported hearing these voices all the way back to 5 or 6 years old, and it was quite rare for a child that young to experience voices. Is that your opinion as well?
Yes, it is.
And what about the fact that she was claiming that she started hearing these voices every single day from a young 5 or 6 years old?
From my experience, talking with patients who have schizophrenia and have auditory hallucinations, they're not usually continuous all day, every day. They're usually here and there, occasionally they're command. At one point during my evaluation, I did not write this in my report, but it's somewhere in the audio, I'm sure. We're talking about the voices, and she was asked, I hope it's on the audio, it may have been during a break, but I do remember she said, I think Attorney Todd asked her, did you listen to that voice? And she said, no, it's a voice in your head, you don't listen to that. And I couldn't find it, but I remember it now. It was there, and that to me says, when I see people who have schizophrenia and they're disorganized, and they hear these voices, you're more likely to do what they say if you recognize the voice. If it's like, yes, my dead grandmother, and you trust the voice, and you've been hearing it for a long time, then you might actually listen to it. But interestingly, when we were talking during that, she said, no, it's a voice in your head, you don't listen to that. And I thought, that makes sense.
I want to take just a little step back to the bipolar. Dr. Pickett, we talked about that there were no periods of 7 days or more for bipolar 1 mania. And I believe the testimony is that for hypomania, you're looking at like a 4-day period. Was there anything that was provided to you, either through Carly's evaluation or prior medical history, that showed that she had had a 4-day period of hypomania?
Not that I could definitively find in anybody's medical records. And what she described to me more on the day of the evaluation was up and down throughout the day, and that it was highly susceptible or related to whatever was going on in her life at that time. It was highly related to her circumstances. At one point, I think when I'm asking her this, I'm kind of pushing her, I'm kind of probing, like, all right, now tell me more about that, and I can find it in my report if I can, but I asked her that, and she kind of gave me all the answers. At one point she said, like, it could be minutes, it could be hours, it could be days, it could be weeks, which sometimes people will do if they don't know the right answer. If I'm asking them, or they're not legitimately having them, they will give me all the answers as if they're hedging, and so I'm skeptical of that. But ultimately, I mean, it was a 4.5 hour interview, so I mean, evaluation. So she's kind of said it different ways at different times. The main theme that I picked up from her was that it was up and down within one day, like a roller coaster, and highly susceptible to what was going on around her, which is not consistent with bipolar disorder.
Whoa.
And I believe we heard testimony earlier that she had been diagnosed with more something akin to like situational responses, and that's why she was given a depression diagnosis.
Yeah. My understanding from reviewing their records is even Annette Bryant, the first therapist that saw her, mentioned anxiety and adjustment disorder. So she was acknowledged that she's anxious and she's having trouble adjusting to something. her life circumstances. And then I think LPC Kirk also said adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. And then I think nurse practitioner Lieber said adjustment disorder, and she said single episode of a major depressive episode.
Indicating that this was not a manic or hypermanic situation.
No, if anything, it would have been the opposite. She would have been depressed and down on that spectrum, not up.
Dr. Clark also diagnosed Carly with a other specified feeding or eating disorder. I don't know that would have much relevance in insanity, but have you ever seen where an eating disorder calls someone to commit murder?
Damn.
No, I have not.
And without diving into it too far, I mean, there were notes in the records where Carly had either binged or restricted her eating at some point.
Yeah. I think even we talked about, I believe, that I know Ashley, certainly Carly told me that Ashley had issues with food and would purge. I believe that I've heard that Carly may have at some point purged. I can't remember who told me that or whether that's true or not, but I think, like her mother, there were some issues with food and restriction of that. I didn't think particularly pertinent to sanity. I didn't necessarily dive into that in depth. And my thoughts were, if she's taking a medicine and she's vomiting, if anything, it's going to be less medication in her system, not more, depending on when she vomits and when she takes the pill. But it's not going to be more medicine in her system. So I didn't put a whole lot of weight on it.
I apologize for it stalling, and I'm so deep into this. I didn't want to go find it on court TV, and then I would have to find where I left off. So, but it is stalling on the law and crime end of this. So I do apologize. Man, this is getting good already. I mean, she was asked by Mrs. Todd, did you do what the voices tell you to do? Did you listen to them? And she goes, no. And then he says, well, that's not usually how people with schizophrenic, they listen to the voices. So this is good. This is devastating to the defense, by the way. All right, again, I apologize for it stalling, but there's nothing I can do about it.
You brought up medicine, Dr. Pickett. I want to talk about that now. And we mentioned the SSRIs earlier. It's been the testimony that Carly was, back in January, put on 25 milligrams of Zoloft. And that she didn't feel like it was doing anything, and then was up to 50 milligrams of Zoloft. Is that what you found to be true in the medical records you reviewed?
Yes.
And then we heard from nurse practitioner Olivia Lieber this morning that she told Carly, I want you to kind of taper off the Zoloft while also taking the Lexapro. Based off your evaluation with Carly and Dr. Clark's evaluation, is that what Carly did with the medication?
No, according to what she told me, no. I think I was told that she stopped the Zoloft abruptly on the 12th, the same day she was prescribed the Lexapro, and she started the Lexapro, 5 milligrams.
And is Lexapro, we heard earlier that Zoloft is an SSRI. Can you tell us again what that SSRI stands for?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Is Lexapro also a SSRI?
Yes, it is.
And so that would affect serotonin levels of the brain.
Yes. That process takes time, though. Typically, you would expect 4 to 6 weeks before you see symptoms. According to UpToDate, which is a worldwide database, it is the doctor's Bible if there is one. It's backed by multi-million-dollar clinical trials, pharmaceutical trials. It is one of, I like it, and I depend on it a lot. It says 2 weeks. Maybe you might see something at 2 weeks. And if I can I get into Lexapro?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, before you do that, Dr. Pickett, 2 weeks. Do you mean it would take 2 weeks for side effects to show up, or it takes 2 weeks for the medication to kind of get in your system?
So side effects can happen more quickly than the benefits. I tell patients that all the time. I'll say, look, I'll give you this SSRI and you may have experienced some side effects before we get to the benefits, but you got to recognize that that's going to happen, because serotonin is not just in your brain, it's also in your gut. So a lot of times there's GI symptoms, upset stomach, diarrhea. It's involved in sex, and so there's decreased libido, difficulty having an orgasm, things like that. I don't know how pertinent that is, but anyways, the side effects can come before. Typically, it's not drastic side effects that make you lose your mind or become psychotic, but it's headache, diarrhea, sexual side effects typically with SSRIs. As far as the Lexapro, so according to UpToDate, the typical dose for an adolescent between 12 and 17 years old is 10 milligrams. That's the starting dose. Maximum dose is 20 milligrams. She was started on 5 milligrams, which is half of the starting dose. And if she was prescribed it on the 12th, and the offense happened on the 19th, that'd be 7 days. Depending on when she was taking her prescription would depend on, did she get 6 or 7 doses. Without getting too technical here, what's called pharmacokinetics, it gets into how, when you take a medicine, it doesn't just go in your stomach and 100% of it gets put into your body instantly. It takes time to kind of build up in your system. And so depending on what's called the half-life of a medication, which I looked it up for Lexapro, is 19 hours. It takes 5 half-lives of a medication to get up to about 99% in your bloodstream. So 19-hour half-life times 5 doses would be about 4 days. So it would have taken about 4 days for the 5 milligrams, which is half of the starting dose, to get up to 100% in her bloodstream at that. And then the bioavailability, so is another thing of any drug you take. Bioavailability, how much of it is available to your biological system? I looked it up for Lexapro, it's 80%. So even when you take this pill, it goes into your stomach, it gets absorbed through the GI tract, it goes through the liver through what's called first pass phenomenon, and your liver tries to say, what is this? And try to decontaminate it kind of thing, if it's a toxin. So about 80% gets absorbed. So if she was on 5 milligrams, which is half the starting dose, it would have taken 4 days to reach her steady state. I think she would have only had 6 or 7 doses in her system. And it was prescribed at 5 milligrams, but because of the bioavailability only being 80%, she probably would have been getting about 4 milligrams. Either way, even if we say it was the 5 milligrams, that's still a quarter of the maximum dose. And if somebody was going to be pushed into a drug-induced hypomania, and again, people in hypomania still can appreciate right and wrong, from my experience, it would have been more likely to have happened if she had stayed on the Zoloft. If she had been on Zoloft plus Lexapro, there would have been more SSRI in her system. And if she was purging, there's even less. So it's a very low dose, a very short amount of time. I do not believe she has bipolar disorder, and so it really does not make sense to me that such a low dose pushed her into a state where she could not appreciate the nature, understand the nature, quality, and wrongfulness of her actions. And then when I got into the footage that I watched myself and the text messages, those affirmed my belief.
And I do want to talk about...
Oh my God. this is chipping away at the whole defense's case. The drugs, voices. She's bipolar. She's blacked out. He just said she didn't have enough stuff in her system, and if she would have kept taking that other stuff that she quit cold turkey, maybe she could have had a psychotic episode, but she stopped taking that other stuff. This is devastating to me. And even me being on the jury and going, whoa, this guy, and he is coming across as very intelligent, like he knows what he is talking about. And I like how he said coming out the gate that he's not, when he gets obtained, he says, I'm not for either side. My findings are my findings, no matter where they fall. And he comes across as being very truthful, that he is not here to just help convict her. Right? Oh my God, y'all, this is huge. This is huge. So he's saying the drugs didn't cause her to do this. And plus, she would have still known right from wrong on that drug. Plus, she claims that she blacked out. So even just adding the knowing right from wrong, it's just another mountain that the defense has to climb up and reach. This is incredible.
The footage and the text messages, I wanted to cover everything that Dr. Clark gave his testimony about first. I believe he stated that he could not relate Carly's use of Lexapro to have caused her to commit these crimes. Would you agree with Lexapro did not cause her to commit murder?
Yeah, I agree with that.
They're in an agreement.
He stated that Carly was in active psychosis at the time of the crime. And I'm assuming that meant some combination of these things. What's your opinion on whether she was in active psychosis?
I do not believe she was in psychosis at the time of the offense. Based on my review of the video, her actions, these text messages, and before, how she was reported to have been before, and how I observed her to be based on video footage afterwards. Psychosis, in my experience, it does not just turn on and off. Mania, hypomania, does not just turn on and off. If a patient comes to the state hospital and they're committed there and they're manic, which is worse than hypomania, it doesn't just turn off. And psychosis doesn't either. They will be delusional, disorganized in their thinking, and very illogical until we start them on a medication that can help. And maybe it helps. It doesn't always. Sometimes it doesn't, even though we try.
So now I want to talk about, he diagnosed Carly as having disassociation. And we heard from Dr. Clark kind of what his explanation of that is, but I want you to please educate me on kind of what disassociation means.
So disassociation, and I'm not the nation's leading expert on dissociation. I am a board certified psychiatrist and we get trained in it. I do not see it a whole lot in my practice. It is relatively rare from my understanding. I think the literature is relatively sparse on it. I think we're realizing that it's more common than we thought, and there's more growing literature on it, but it's still not a widely accepted common explanation for violence. Especially, it can be associated with violence, and I read one of the articles that Dr. Clark had mentioned, and in that report it talks about that.
I think that's on page 50.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that's on the SSRI.
I'm not sure if that's the article. Let me see. It would take me a minute to find it.
If you'll look back, I apologize, actually, because that one was about the SSRIs.
Yeah, that one's SSRIs and violence, if I can.
Your diagnosis regarding the possibility of disassociation starts on page 52 of your report.
Gotcha, thank you. While I was on the subject of the SSRIs and violence, some of the literature actually suggests that it's lower levels of serotonin that are commonly associated with aggressive behaviors. And they go into animal studies with monkeys and how it's the lower levels of serotonin that are more associated with violence. And then as far as the dissociation, I believe the literature talks about, yes, there can be violence, but my understanding is it's not a specific violence. Like if you're in a dissociative state and you can't control yourself, you may accidentally hurt an unintended target. You're cleaning your gun and you have a dissociative spell and there's somebody in the house and you accidentally pull the trigger and it shoots them in the leg. Maybe. Unlikely? Maybe. It's possible. But having a dissociative spell and then doing a lot of specific things, going and retrieving a gun or an item, an object from a specific location that requires memory, hand-eye coordination, going to get that, that's, in my opinion, inconsistent with a dissociative spell.
Oh.
Yes, if you're in a dissociative spell, you may accidentally, unintentionally hurt a random person. But I do not believe there's a lot of literature out there that supports you have a dissociative spell and you go and hunt down a particular target. I just don't believe that.
I'm sorry.
That's
Gregg, I didn't
huge.
mean to cut you off.
Oh my God.
I wanted to continue on a little bit about the dissociation if I can, or you
Yes,
can.
please.
So when I was considering the dissociative spell, one of the books that I was using to read and talk about is on page 53, The Principles and Practice of Forensic Psychiatry, 2nd edition. It says, quote, on page 643, it says, quote, malingered amnesia is also seen frequently in forensic settings, as well as being the arguably most common manifestation of malingering in specific clinical situations such as homicide. And the literature goes on to talk about how we as providers have an obligation to consider malingering when there's a huge secondary gain of having decreased culpability by being able to blame it on that. And so I took all of that into consideration. Continuing on, as when I was considering the dissociative stuff, Carly never mentioned these spells to any of her providers over decades. You know, her trauma that she experienced. So the DSM talks about this, the DSM-5-TR talks about this. The chapters related to trauma, PTSD, stuff like that, and dissociative disorders are put right next to each other intentionally to show their relationship. In my understanding, at a basic level, there are some dissociative disorders that you dissociate uncontrollably, with no prompt, with no stimuli. Dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder, the dissociative fugue that Dr. Clark talked about, where these patients will just randomly and in a very general, unintentional way get up and travel somewhere. But it's random. It's disorganized. They don't know where they're going. They're not in control of their faculties. They just end up in Dallas, Texas, and who am I? Where am I? Where's my credit cards? You know, that it's an unintentional thing. And so as I was looking through this, Carly never mentioned it to any of her previous providers. Ashley, who was very involved, never mentioned it. She did mention some zoning out, I believe, and Heath did call me, and we did not get out of this, but he did say she had some periods of kind of forgetting things, having to use a calendar to remember some things, which was unusual, what he said. Also, voluntary intoxication. If she's smoking marijuana to, I don't know how often, at some point, I think she even may have drank Germ-X per like one of her colleagues that said that. I don't know if that's true or just hearsay. But if there was some substances that she may have been abusing, it's hard to say. Was that related to substances, which she acknowledges the marijuana, or was that a real dissociative spell?
And Dr. Pickett, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There was actually a point where Carly related either in her journal or to a provider that she had smoked marijuana on the 16th of March, and she had something come over her body that she had never felt before. Do you remember seeing that?
I don't recall seeing that. I may have missed it. I did want to say, I remember my thought, is that none of the dissociative spells, because trauma and dissociative spells are so closely related, she saw Annette Bryant monthly for years, from 2015 to 2019, when she was really young. And that was closer to the proximate trauma. The abuse from her dad, the death of her sister prematurely. And so I would have expected, if she were legitimately having dissociative spells, I would have expected them to have been closer to the proximate trauma. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but typically I would have expected that. Also, dissociative spells I've never experienced one, but from the few people that I've talked to that say they have, they're not pleasant, and they're scary, and you're not in control of your body. I just find it very hard to believe that an adolescent who was experiencing these, that was so close to her mother, who was very involved in her life, would not have mentioned it. That's hard for me to believe. And then, lastly, the malingering and the secondary gain, just the convenience of, I don't remember anything from when I took the dogs out to when I woke up in the sewer. But, in block is what it's called, in block dissociative spells, where it's a big finite period, those are rare. As Dr. Clark said, the patchy dissociation is more common. And so to say that you don't remember anything from these periods, given all of this, is just really hard for me to believe.
Wow.
You were here yesterday when Dr. Clark testified, right?
Oh my God.
And I think he talked about that that it's more common, that it's patchy, and Ms. Todd kind of attempted to clear that up, and he was saying that still wouldn't change, even if she remembered certain things, that wouldn't change his diagnosis. But Carly had reported to him in his evaluation that she was having, and I don't think flashbacks is the right word, but that she was hearing gunshots in her dreams, that she was having, she told Dr. Giuliano that she was queasy thinking about the incident. Is that in line with somebody who does not remember an event happening?
If she were having patchy amnesia, I could say maybe. But if you're reporting in block amnesia from a period, I would find it very hard to believe that you have those symptoms related to an incident that you don't remember.
I want to ask this too. This may seem like a silly question. You've used the word malingering a couple times. For somebody that's not a psychiatrist or even in the medical field, is malingering just kind of faking?
In very basic terms, they're similar. It's deceptive. It's lying for a secondary gain. You have a reason. Maybe, you have a reason to lie, and you do. Or you exaggerate your symptoms for a secondary gain. That's what malingering is.
And in this case, you consider that Carly, now talking about these disassociative spells, is in fact her malingering because she has a secondary gain.
In my opinion, that's a very high probability. Yes.
Oh,
And Dr. Clark actually testified yesterday that there are times, quite frequently, that people that commit the crime of murder claim that they were in a disassociative state because they have huge secondary gains.
Yeah. According to some of the literature I quoted, yes, that's very common. It's one of the most common.
I want to talk a little bit more about this disassociation. We know from...
oh my God. This is, I keep saying devastating. It is. This is, oh my God, y'all. This is bad for Carly. She was saying, I could hear gunshots in my dreams, or I'm having, and he's like, well, if you were blacked out, then no, you're not going to remember. And is she malingering? Does she have something to gain? Yeah, she has everything to gain. Her freedom. And she also, oh my God, says in her journal that she did mention one time she hears voices, and then she says she might sound crazy and this is just silly. And he says most people wouldn't pass it off as silly because this is serious stuff. It's not silly. Again, she could be writing it because she thinks somebody else is going to be reading it. Oh my God. This is devastating, y'all. I'm on the edge of my seat. We are still on direct with this guy. I mean, he's been on for like 2 or 3 hours with her.
From all the testimony of her providers and the medical records, that there was no history of this noted in any of her records prior to March 19. Did Carly report to you that she had had any additional spells of disassociation after March 19th?
Yes, while we were talking, I cited in my report the time. I asked her, I said, have any of these spells, I'm paraphrasing, have any of these spells where you do not remember things, or dissociative spells, have any of those happened since the incident? And she said, yes, actually I'm having one right now as we were doing the evaluation. And that was a 4.5 hour evaluation in which I did many tests that tested her intelligence and ability to complete tasks and recall and spatial awareness and language and all these things. And she said that she was having one then, and she also said, well, back Tuesday in court I had one, and Attorney Todd agreed with her and said, yes, I could see it on your face. And so when I asked Carly about these spells, she said they happened every time her mother yelled at her. But she did say that she seemed to remember those incidents, was my impression, and yet this one she said she did not remember it. That's my understanding from talking with her. And so it was very inconsistent. And there's one thing I do think is important. I think we need to distinguish between zoning out and inattention, which happens to all of us, and dissociative spells. As I was saying earlier, there's some disorders that you legitimately have where you don't have control over it and you dissociate. And what you do during that period, we can talk about and discuss. But there's disorders that it happens sporadically, and then there's kind of peri-traumatic dissociative spells. And what Carly seemed to be describing to me were peri-traumatic dissociative spells. When her mother would yell at her, she would dissociate because that triggered her. That's a trauma in her eyes. The DSM-5-TR gives examples of a prisoner of war who's being tortured, and their body cannot take it anymore. And so their brain essentially hits, for lack of a better word, the ejection button. And the brain says, I cannot take this anymore. I'm under so much stress. I'm out of here. And it dissociates. Or another example that the DSM-5 TR gives is human sex trafficking. Somebody who's being repeatedly raped over and over. Their bodies cannot take the trauma that they are experiencing anymore, and their brain hits the ejection button, which, to my knowledge, the brain does not do this half-heartedly. It leaves the body in a very vulnerable state, being dissociated. You are vulnerable to everything around you. If you cannot control your body, you're vulnerable to predators, attack, anything. The brain, it doesn't make sense that the brain would do this half-heartedly. Again, there are disorders where it happens sporadically and you cannot control them. Dissociative identity disorder, the dissociative fugue, the dissociative amnesia, but the peri-traumatic dissociative spells, to my understanding, you are being traumatized and therefore your brain hits the ejection button. But you do not dissociate and then go traumatize other people, is my understanding. And that's from my training, my research, things that I've read about this, preparing, and the articles, and my training and knowledge and experience, and seeing patients.
Dr. Pickett, I want to.
So Carly, he's saying her mother yelling at her probably doesn't raise to the occasion of being tortured. You're in the military, you've been captured and you're being tortured, and you can't take the pain and the stress, and your body just disassociates. Okay, somebody being tortured and those other things. So this is telling me, I mean, if my little brain full of mush is picking up, that he's like, Carly's mom fussing at her doesn't mean she's going to she's just going to disassociate and leave her body. Because it's not, there's no evidence that her mom was abusive to her. So she's saying her mom fussing at her, being a normal parent. Now, this is just my opinion. I mean, I could be getting all this wrong. But this is what I'm gathering. So her mom yelling at her, she has these experiences when her mom yelled at her. Guys, here's the question. Here's the question. So Carly killed her mom because her mom was yelling at her, and Carly disassociated and blacked out. That's the defense? Is that the question? Because I kept asking, why did Carly kill her mom? So far with the defense, when it was their turn with Dr. Clark, my thought pattern was, okay, so they established she blacked out, she hears voices, she didn't know what she was doing. But what this guy is saying is dismantled all of that. So now the question to me is, well, Carly's mom yells at her. Carly disassociates when her mom yells at her. So she disassociated and completely blacked out and then went and killed her mom and did deliberate tasks like he was talking about. She had deliberate thought processes. And he says usually when people disassociate, they'll end up in Texas. She deliberately gets a gun that's in a specific place. She deliberately kills her mother. Deliberately, she's coming back. She is picking up the phone. She is deliberately doing these tasks, calling her dad. When are you coming home, honey? Texting. She texted her stepdad. Texting her friends to come over. asking questions to her friend. Are you squeamish around a dead body? Now, he didn't say all this stuff, but he was alluding to, well, she did specific tasks, and he just named a few, like going and getting the gun, knowing where the gun is in a specific location. Now, she's claiming she's blacked out. She's disassociated. But she even talks to her. I'm just adding on. I'm piling on. So she even talks to her friend when her friend gets there. I'm assuming that's when she talked to the girl. Like, hey, I just shot her 3 times. I've got 3 more bullets for my stepdad. These are deliberate acts. That doesn't sound like she is just... and they're specific. Very specific tasks. All of this stuff Carly did. Anyway, here we go.
I put you to page 31 of your report quickly when you were talking about your conversation with Carly regarding her disassociative spells. Was there a time that she actually said, like, she called it derealization?
I believe so, yes.
And what is that a medical term?
Yes, it is.
In treating any of your other patients, have they ever used the term, I was derealized?
No.
Do they call it themselves before getting a diagnosis, I disassociated?
No.
And prior to your evaluation with Carly, she actually had not received any diagnoses of disassociation. Isn't that true?
Correct.
But in fact, the defense told you that was going to be their argument for insanity, right?
Yes.
Tell me about
one avenue.
Tell me about that, because that was on the day of your evaluation before, I think 5 or 6 days before we got their expert report.
Can you clarify exactly which part so I make sure I'm following you?
Yeah, so in your interview, you asked about making sure that you kind of covered all the right things. You kind of wanted to know what is it, why is it that you're claiming Carly was insane?
Yeah, I do remember that. At one point, and it is on the audio, you can hear, I think Carly may have stepped away just to go to the bathroom, and I asked Attorney Todd, I said, hey, I want to make sure I cover the right stuff. Can you tell me, can you clarify exactly what, as far as insanity? And she said that, I think she said the medications worsened an underlying unrecognized diagnosis. And I said, okay, all right, I'm just making sure I'm following. And that was, I think Dr. Clark had done his evaluation the day before.
And do you recall what Carly said as she walked back into the room for the evaluation?
I cannot remember.
Would it refresh your memory? She said something about, like, what mental condition do I have?
I'd have to listen to the audio. I can't remember.
But to that point,
I hope they play it. I want to see Miss Todd leading Carly. I want to see these questions Carly's saying. I want to see Carly diagnosing herself by saying she has derealization. And where the hell did she learn that word from? Hell, I don't even know this word. I mean, guys, would y'all want to see some of the video? Yeah, because all of this stuff he's saying, I want to see Carly putting her hand up and saying she was outside her body, because he said she put her hand up when she's describing her, when he's asking her questions about her mental status and her thought process, her racing thoughts. She said ocean, and he's talking about giving perfect textbook answers. He said normally they wouldn't just put their hand up and do this. Like she's trying to, maybe she's trying to convince him that she has these things. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just hoping they play some of this stuff. They have video. He filmed it. Or did he just say it was just audio? I hope it's video. That would be amazing if they play it. And if the jury's going to want to see it and hear it, they're going to have access to it. It's been put into evidence, I would assume.
Point, she had not been diagnosed by any physician or psychiatrist with disassociation.
Not that I was able to find in reviewing the medical records, psychiatric records.
When you asked Carly to describe the events of March the 19th, how did she describe her mom's demeanor when she found out about the vape pens and the burner phones?
I think, if my memory serves me correctly, she described her as frustrated, and they didn't talk on the ride home. She was upset, and her mom searched her backpack, and they didn't talk on the ride home, and that was it.
So Carly acknowledged that mom was very upset about finding out these things. So
Okay, so Carly knew her mom was upset. Let me see if I get this right. On the way home, they're saying they didn't talk. I was assuming, I said in past video, I assumed that they talked about it and her mom was upset. Well, obviously her mom is upset. She searches Carly's backpack, so Carly knows her mom is onto her. She gets in the car, she searches her backpack, and then they're quiet the rest of the way. What does this mean? Carly had time to plan? Carly stewing the whole time? They didn't talk? But Carly knows her mom's pissed at her because of the vape pens and the burner and all this other crap. That's just an interesting point. She has time to stew. She has time to think about this. What's mom going to do? I'm going to be grounded, all of this other stuff, that the ramifications of her actions. She's in trouble.
You asked Carly to describe for you kind of what she could remember from that day, March the 19th, 2024. If you would walk us through what she told you.
I remember her telling me that she hadn't slept well the night before, went to school that morning, was irritable, cussed out a friend, went through the rest of her day. I believe she was doing okay. And then she went to, I remember her explaining that she remembered going from her room down the hall, up the stairs, and to her mother's room. And then when she got there...
And to be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt you, she's talking about at the school still,
At the
right?
school, yes, because her mother was a teacher. And after that, it seemed like, according to what I've gathered, that her mother was upset and searched her backpack. They drove home. They did not talk, and they were upset.
And then did Carly tell you she remembers letting the dogs outside?
Yep. She told me that she remembers letting the dogs out, and then she doesn't remember anything from then until when she awoke in the sewer.
And when you asked her about the sewer, do you recall her saying, "I knew I did something wrong because I wouldn't have been running away"?
I remember her saying something along the lines of that she said that she did something wrong to the police officer because it seemed like the logical thing to do, was kind of how she described it.
And then she said something to the effect of, when he asked her if you're the girl that shot, she said yeah, and that's what she's talking about because it was the logical thing to do.
I believe so, yes.
In your audio recording, you're talking to her about that time, about after she came out of the sewer, and when we know to be Tony Shack, we watched the video of that yesterday, takes her into custody. And she said something to the effect of, "I thought Heath was dead." Do you remember her saying that?
I remember watching the deputy's audio, his video camera, and she asked about Heath, and then the officer, the deputy, mentioned the mother, but then yesterday in his testimony he said it wasn't the mother, it was just Heath. And that's that.
What, if anything, do you remember about Carly describing for you seeing Bennett and his mom on the scene?
Yes, I believe in my audio it talks about how she was worried. She remembers seeing Bennett and Bennett's mother and was worried that they would hate her.
And did she tell you why she thought they would hate her at that moment?
She didn't elaborate that. I had my presumptions, but I did not force her to say why.
Because based upon what she told you, she only remembered letting the dogs out and coming to in the sewer, right?
Right.
So they'd be mad at her about something to do with letting the dogs out?
I don't know.
Dr. Pickett, I want to talk to you a little more about your opinion regarding the McNaughton standard in this case, right? So we, unfortunately, people had to see these videos where Carly goes into a room, we hear 3 gunshots, and then she comes out. I want you to walk me through the reasons that you believe that she had specific intent to commit these crimes and that she knew right from wrong at the time.
Okay. Well, backing up a little bit, just knowing the context from what I was told, or from what I gathered from reviewing Discovery, was that Bennett and a friend were really concerned about her substance abuse. That's what I saw in text messages with Discovery, reading that. So they approached her mom, and Carly went there after school. They rode home but did not talk. This is per Carly. She was frustrated. Ashley was frustrated, per Carly. And then when they get home, I start in the garage video footage. I see Carly, what looks like she kind of jerks the door open, looks frustrated. Then they go inside, and they're at the kitchen. They put everything down, and they make eye contact, and Carly looks her in the eyes and kind of rolls her neck like this, which is kind of, to me, seems like a tense situation. They're not talking. And then Ashley goes straight to Carly's side of the house, presumably Carly's room. So knowing the context, seeing that, it seems like a tense situation where Ashley being as involved, and her, according to Carly, one of her greatest fears was that Carly would one day turn into her dad, who constantly used substances and had a lot of mood lability. And so Ashley seems to go straight to Carly's room, or Carly's side of the house. I don't know that it was her room. And Carly can be seen on the Wise video footage kind of moving back and forth, touching her face, touching her hair. Seems a little frustrated, anxious. And so I go through all that video, I watch it, and then after Carly walks back in the house. So at one point you see in the video, Carly takes the dogs out. Ashley comes back. She kind of looks through the window. At one point she has what looks like a little black cylinder-shaped small object in her hand. I don't know what it is. I presume, based on the context and knowing what about it, that it is maybe a vape pen. I don't know for sure. And so then Ashley goes back towards, I think, her room and then Carly's room or area, side of the house. Carly comes in the house, and at this time Ashley is on Carly's side of the house. Carly kind of comes up to the entryway. She's leaning forward. She's got both of her hands, not in fists, I don't want to say fists, but down by her side. She's leaning forward. She pauses as if she's thinking something, and then slowly turns towards her room. And then she quickly, briskly walks directly across the screen from Carly's side of the house to Ashley's side of the house. So given the context and seeing her walk so briskly, seemingly purposefully, directly to where the object is that could kill her mother or kill somebody, to me shows an intact memory, it shows an intact motor function, it shows coordination, and it suggests a specific intent. She did not walk to the kitchen and grab a banana. She did not walk to in a disorganized state of mind. She did not walk to the living room and grab a remote control in a confused, dissociative spell. She walked directly to where the sole object that could kill her mother was, and she retrieved it. To me, that says that this person shows a very specific intent on what they plan to do, and that suggests that she understands the nature and the quality of what she's about to do. That's why she went specifically to where the gun was, not to the kitchen or to anywhere else. Continuing on, and it gets even more convincing to me as I watch the video, at 16, 14, 15 on that video, she peeks around the corner and she's hiding something, concealing something behind her back. To me, this shows a spatial awareness. So Ashley could have moved. Ashley could have moved to the kitchen. You've got to look around and see, because if that person has moved, your intended target has moved, you don't want to just walk straight across to your room with this object. They could intervene, they could see you, they could stop you. Instead, in a very methodical manner, she peeks around the corner with the object behind her back. To me, that shows spatial awareness. And these are high-functioning executive skills that your brain has to, different areas, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, all of these different areas of the brain have to do this for you to do such intricate things. This was done, in my opinion, as a forensic psychiatrist reviewing this video, to locate the intended victim, to ensure Ashley had not moved so that she could not intervene, and so that she could, and she did it in a very, just her head around the corner, hiding the object. That suggests, that's almost predatory in my opinion. That is looking, that is intentional, that's not accidental, that's not dissociative, that's not psychotic.
Smokes.
Then after she does that, she clears the kitchen, she sidesteps with the object still behind her back, and this object is still directly where the Wise camera cannot see it, and it's an awkward sidestep, and I wouldn't expect somebody to do that unless they were intentionally trying to conceal or avoid detection from the surveillance camera. And that to me suggests strongly that she appreciated the nature, quality, and wrongfulness of what she was doing at that time.
Oh.
Then she goes into her bed, her side of the house, I presume her room, and we hear the gunshots. And then we hear some screams. And as I know from reviewing the autopsy pictures, there were at least 2 shots in Ashley's head. That takes that marksmanship of landing those shots on a relatively small target, that if you shoot it once, I presume with gravity and whatnot, it might move. So to stay on it and shoot it again shows a high level of brain functioning. Motor centers, the cerebellum with coordination, the occipital lobe with the visual centers. This is a high level of functioning. So then, continuing on, then Carly comes, a little time passes, Carly comes into the dining area and she gets Ashley's phone. I believe it's Ashley's phone from what I've been told. And there's a passcode on it, and she unlocks it, which that, to me, shows that she has some degree of intact memory, hand-eye coordination, and that this was calculated and specific. You have to type in a specific code to unlock the phone. It's not a disorganized, unintentional, random numbers. It's a specific code. And then she texts Heath, her stepfather, which is a specific target. It's not a disorganized, confused, psychotic, random numbers. It's Heath's phone that she dials. And then she texts him and says, "You almost home, comma, honey, question mark." In my report, I used some very strong language just to describe this one aspect. I used the word diabolical. And I stand by that word. I do not believe Carly is a diabolical person. I do not believe she's an evil person. I believe all of us have the potential for good and evil, and in us, it's human nature. As a psychiatrist, I study human nature. Anger, lust, greed. These are things I study. And so we all have the potential to do that. But when Carly on that day went and unlocked the phone, texted a specific target, her stepfather, who she told me was more of a father figure to her than Kevin was, and said, "When are you almost home, honey?" Using that honey is an enduring term. I might use it for my family, a loved one. I wouldn't use it for a stranger. When she did that, to me, that was very specific and diabolical. And that, to me, is not consistent with a dissociative spell. That is not consistent with psychosis. That is not consistent with mania. And it's definitely not consistent with hypomania. To me, that was deceitful. And so the fact that she did it from Ashley's phone instead of her own phone, I asked myself, why would she do that? If I don't know the norms of their family, I don't know if it's normal for Carly to text Heath and say, "Hey, when are you going to be home?" That might have, if that's not normal, that might have been a warning, or like, something wrong? Why are you texting me? Why are you texting me when I'm going to be home? So to me, the fact that she did it from Ashley's phone, posing as her mother who's in the other room dead or dying, really suggests a specific intent, that she understood the nature, the quality of what she was doing, and I would suggest even the wrongfulness by, she didn't use her own phone because she didn't want to raise alarm, in my opinion. Then, at one point in that video, right about that same time, she lets out this like hymn. Look, the camera's right there. She knows the camera's there. She sidestepped earlier with the gun behind her back, which tells me she is aware that that camera is there. When she came back into the dining room, she had something behind her back that she laid on the stool. She kept it on the stool behind her. At one point, the dog walks behind her. She kind of looks behind to make sure there's not going to fall off in front of the camera. So all of that suggests to me that she was very aware of the camera. And I think that she was trying to, for lack of better words, play cool. And just, she's interested in music. She plays the guitar. She plays the mandolin. She built a mandolin with her grandfather. She's a musical person. And I think she naturally let out this hymn as almost a play cool. I know the camera's on me. But it was not disorganized. It was not in some weird, disorganized fashion. It was not weird language. It was not a demonic voice. It was a short hymn. And I think she was trying to play cool. And I think to me, that was callous. And so I also think it was related to some nervous adrenaline. Like and she lets out this hymn. Continuing on, as I watched the video, at one point she goes back to her room, or her side of the house. I don't know, there was room. And the dogs are in the dining room and they make some noise. And she yells out, Heath, Heath, Heath. That was a very specific name. That was not a disorganized name. It was not a random stranger. It was not in some strange voice. It was very controlled, not like a pressured mania, disorganized or psychotic and disorganized. To me, that shows that she knew exactly who was going to come home. It was not disorganized. It was not illogical. It was logical. And I believe after that, she recognized the dogs keep making noise. I got to get rid of them because I don't know if Heath's coming home. Heath, is that you? Because she is in the room with her dead mother. That to me suggests that she strongly understood the nature and the quality of what she was doing at that time. That's why she called out his name. That's why she let the dogs out, because they were making noise. She doesn't know, is that the dogs making that noise or is that Heath coming in? So she lets the dogs out. And this conveniently puts her right beside the camera footage that then turns off and is later found hidden behind some water bottles in the refrigerator. I presume it's hidden. There were water bottles and it was behind it in the corner. To me, that strongly suggests somebody who's trying to hide evidence and avoid detection because they appreciated the wrongfulness of what they were doing. A psychotic person who's disorganized and doesn't know who they are or what just happened or where they're at, I do not believe would put the camera, take it down and put it in the refrigerator behind water bottles. This also, when she came back out, gives her a second opportunity in front of the camera to play cool. And she said to the dog, she kind of whistles and she says to the dogs, it's okay, it's okay. And I have dogs myself, and I thought, why would I tell my dogs it's okay unless it wasn't okay? Unless even seemingly the dogs might have appreciated that it wasn't okay. I'm not a dog psychiatrist, but some things seem to transcend species. And at this point I saw the dogs were down, their ears were down, they were running around, and she lets them out, and she even comforts them and says, it's okay, it's okay, and whistles. And to me, that was kind of self-incriminating. It's a small thing, but a guilty conscience. If you're aware of what you've done, you might try and comfort the dogs and say, it's okay, it's okay. Then, so that's from the video footage. Then I get into the text messages. Do you want me to continue on?
Yes, please.
So with S.K. Riley, she texts and says, Carly says, I need help, which tells me she understood the situation to some degree. Then she capitalizes it, emphasizing, I need help, which tells me she's serious. She knows, she understands the nature and the quality of what just happened. Then she replies, I can't tell you, which again tells me she understood the wrongfulness, because why couldn't she tell one of her best friends unless she couldn't tell her because she understood that it was wrong? And then she said, I'm not going to KMS. That stands for kill myself or anything. She even appreciated that her friend was concerned that she was going to harm herself. And she recognized that and was able to tell her friend and comfort her friend, I'm not going to kill myself. That showed.
I'm back. You didn't know I left. I had to stop it and go to the restroom. And I hung some clothes out on the line. It's a nice day today. And I hung some towels out. So we're going to jump back into this. I know we've gone about an hour, but they're still on cross. And oh man, have they covered a bunch of stuff. He used the word diabolical. Now, remember in the past videos, if y'all have been keeping up with the case, that the defense had brought up diabolical. And then I had paused it and made comments such as, I think they're going to use diabolical because of the way she was in the videos. It all looked deliberate and diabolical to me. And then the way he broke it down, she's aware of the camera. She's looking around, has her arms beside her. She goes to Ashley's side of the house in a specific location, grabs the gun, has it behind her back, peeks around the corner in the kitchen. Which, I am not as good as he is, obviously, but she did peek, and he's telling us, and I love this, that he broke down the video. Because we didn't get this from Clark. We didn't get play-by-play, and I wanted him to, and I think I mentioned this in my videos. Like, I want to hear what he has to say about the video. What he's saying is that because she's not disassociated, and she's not blacked out, is that when she came back through, knowing the camera's there, she deliberately peeks into the kitchen to see if her mother had moved from her previous location. And she's got the gun behind her back. Now, he's not using gun. He said an object. She's got something behind her back. And we all know it's the gun. But which is fascinating and interesting in that he says she looks in, and why she looked in to see if Ashley had moved from Carly's room to the kitchen, because she doesn't want to be found out or stopped in what she's about to do, or interrupted, rather. Maybe he used that word. So she's going to be interrupted. So then she got, so this is all calculating and diabolical. Now, he did say he doesn't think Carly's, this confuses me, because he says, before he said a lot of that about her looking, and he brought up the word diabolical, and then he says something to the effect of, well, I don't think Carly is diabolical or an evil person, but he said what she was doing, this is what my little brain's picking up, guys, what she was doing then was diabolical. Man, they're still on direct. I'm going to keep going. Maybe this video might go a little bit longer, but I don't know how much longer she's going to keep him on direct. I mean, we're already 7 hours in, so we got 2 hours left. Is the defense going to get a crack at him before the day is out? I don't know. Like I said, I haven't dived further because I want to hear each part of the testimony fresh. And, I know the trial is over, and all of this good stuff, but I haven't watched the coverage of it. And Carly, he's saying Carly is aware of what she has done, what she is doing. Her calming the dogs is a deliberate act of, I guess, I don't know if he used the word consciousness or some kind of thought process that she's calming the dogs down because she knows she did something wrong. There's something wrong that has happened. So why is she calming the dogs down? And her picking up the phone and her deliberately doing all these other tasks. So let's get back into the direct. This is devastating. This is devastating. I mean, for me, as a spectator, listening to all the evidence so far, and with all the doctors, seems like the only doctor they had in their favor, I don't want to use in their pocket, in their favor, was Dr. Clark. But between the other doctors, the nurse practitioner, the counselor therapist, and then the other lady who the prosecution had brought on in the rebuttal, this is just a mountain that the defense is going to have to climb, because obviously they've established no prior with all of these other doctors, that they could see that she had heard voices. She's been having blackouts. Other than the dad had said she might have had to use her calendar to remember stuff. And he says it wasn't usual. Man, I have to write on my calendar or I am going to forget stuff. And even my own kid writes stuff on the calendar. You can't always remember every single thing. Maybe if you're like a super genius and you've got this big thing in your low brain that you can remember every specific thing, and no. So that to me shot all that down. Just her stepdad saying, well, she has to write some stuff on a calendar. Anyway, let's get back into this.
Me a awareness of her situation and even an appreciation of her friend's concern. Continuing on, she referenced, I'm glad you met Raymond. So I found out through discovery and things and talking, and that Raymond, I believe, is a boyfriend of Sarah's or a friend or a lover or something. And she references this Raymond. And S.K. Riley even thanked her for that. To me, if you're in a dissociative spell where you are so out of your mind and so psychotic that you don't understand the nature, quality of what you're doing, I find it very hard to believe that you would be able to recall a relationship that your friend has with somebody and reference that to them.
Wow.
Your Honor, may we approach for just a second? Yes.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Just another blow on not being blacked out, not having disassociation, derealization, dissociation. It's just another blow in the defense's case that she's aware of what she's doing. According to him and his opinion.
Dr. Pickett, other than the Sarah Kate Rayleigh text messages, were there other messages that indicated to you, because the jury has heard some of those messages from Sarah Catherine Rayleigh and Bennett Germany, were there other messages or other things that you relied upon in determining that she did in fact know right from wrong on that day?
There's other text messages. There's one with Bennett and there's one with Thad. And then there's also some things from Brooks' statement that I read that were, but see, that's her statement, but these are actually Carly's words at the time. And so I think they're important because to me, they speak volumes about her understanding of the nature and the quality at the time. So I know those witnesses have spoken, but the text messages do speak to her understanding of the nature and the quality of what was going on.
Wow.
And included in some of those messages, I think Sarah Catherine read out something to the effect of, last message was, I'll tell you tomorrow if I see you. Did you consider that one?
Yeah. That to me suggested that she had a more than an understanding, even an appreciation that there might be some consequences coming my way for this, and I may not see you tomorrow.
And similarly, when she told Thad, excuse my language, I've fucked up. I mean, that would indicate that she knew that she had done something wrong.
In my opinion, yes.
She was able to tell Bennett what her address was and where she was. Is that your understanding of the text messages between them as well?
Yes, which I did not believe that would be consistent with a dissociative spell or somebody who was disorganized or psychotic or even having a dissociative amnesia, that they would be able to recall their address and state it in a text message, which again requires the language centers of the brain, the visual centers, the hand-eye coordination, and the recall memory to do that.
And then I believe that you referenced in your report some of the messages with Thad, and the jury's had the benefit of hearing him testify, but he actually offered to call 911, and at some point she tells him, no, you can't do that.
Yeah. To me, that would strongly suggest that she understood the nature and quality of what happened, and that she understood the wrongfulness, because if he were to call 911 and paramedics show up, then she would be seen with a dead body there. And
I want to talk about Brooks' statement just a little bit regarding Carly's shooting and attempting to kill Heath. What particularly about Brooks' statement led you to believe that Carly knew right from wrong and had specific intent for that crime?
yes, I will answer. I do want to clarify that the video footage and the text messages, that's all my opinion off of my observations of all this. When we get into Brooks' statements, that is my opinion based on somebody else's statement, so it has to be taken with a grain of salt there. But if what Brooks says is true, suppose reportedly, per her statement, Carly asked her, "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" Which certainly, if that is true, suggests that Carly understood at the time the nature and the quality of what she had done, and even that somebody else may have different feelings about it, which shows a higher level of appreciation, that I can not only know my feelings, but I can understand how you might feel. And then, do you want me to continue on as far as
Yes,
Brooks?
please.
Reportedly, if what Brooks says is true, Carly assured Brooke not to worry about the cameras, that they had already been taken care of. And so that would suggest to me that Carly appreciated, understood the wrongfulness of her, what she had done, and therefore was trying to avoid detection.
And then she also made some comment to Brooke about, I put 3 in my mom and I got 3 more waiting for my stepdad when he gets home.
Yeah. If that is true, that would strongly suggest that Carly, at the time of the offense, understood the nature, quality, and wrongfulness of what she had done.
I want to back up just a little bit to Dr. Clark's diagnoses of Carly. I diagnosed her as being bipolar, schizophrenic tendencies, dissociation, and eating disorder. So we've gone through, Dr. Pickett, how you, other than the eating disorder, you do not agree with his diagnoses. But for argument's sake, let's say that all of his diagnoses are proper. That Carly did suffer from bipolar, some form or symptoms of a schizophrenic-like situation and possibly a dissociation. That does not mean that she is insane, correct?
Correct. As I was explaining earlier, having a threshold diagnosis is just your ticket to even consider insanity. Without a diagnosis, you cannot even consider the other prongs of the standard. You have to have that just to even be considered. That in and of itself does not equal insanity, in my opinion, from what I know based on the state standard. I have, from experience, I have patients who have schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and they know when we talk, hey, all right, you're going home soon, you know you don't need to do this or that, you take your med, they know right from wrong. Just because they have the diagnosis does not mean they're insane. I do have my diagnoses.
Yes, I was about to ask you if you could tell the ladies and gentlemen kind of what you diagnosed Carly with, and then kind of your overall conclusion regarding those diagnoses and how that might have affected her on that day.
I bet it's depression.
Yes. So based on record review, she was diagnosed with adjustment disorder, with mixed anxiety and depressed mood, and a single major depressive episode. I agree with those based on the records and what I've reviewed at the time. I think those were reasonable. I also, in addition, felt like she met criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, which According to the DSM-5-TR, excessive anxiety or worry occurring more days than not for at least 6 months, the individual finds it difficult to control, and they have at least 3 of the following symptoms. Restlessness, or feeling keyed up or on edge, so they're antsy, they're on edge, they feel restless.
She's a teenager.
Being easily fatigued, I did not think that one applied. Difficulty concentrating or mind going blank. I feel like that could apply to her zoning out. Her irritability, it says, muscle tension and sleep disturbances. And then it says, these cannot be better attributed to a substance or another mental disorder. So for generalized anxiety disorder, she seemed on edge. That's one of the reasons she explained to me that she smoked marijuana, was if she was going to have if she couldn't sleep at night, or if she was going to have a bad day that day, she didn't want to have a nervous breakdown at school, she might smoke marijuana to help with her anxiety and nervousness. The mind going blank, that may explain her zoning out. In psychiatry, we kind of try to find diagnoses that explain most of the symptoms, and the generalized anxiety disorder is pervasive. I mean, it goes back to when she was a child, talking with Annette Bryant about adjustment and anxiety and the issues she was having with her dad. So on edge, hence she used marijuana, mind going blank, the zoning out spells, irritability, and the sleep disturbances. All of those are included in generalized anxiety disorder. So I felt like, based on the DSM-5-TR, she met criteria for that, and it would explain a lot of her symptoms. Also, cluster B traits. So people are typically hesitant to diagnose a personality disorder in an adolescent because the brain is still developing, there's hormones involved, and it can be stigmatizing, and it takes time to really get to know that person. They have to have a pervasive pattern. I looked through years and years and years of records, decade of record, back to 2011. So 2011 to 2024. So yeah, over a decade. I felt like that gave me the ability to look at things over a long period of time. Again, I'm not going to diagnose her with a personality disorder, but she does show some emerging cluster B traits. In personality disorders, which are common, there's different clusters that get grouped together based on different things. She shows some what's called cluster B, which includes borderline personality, antisocial personality, narcissistic personality, and histrionic personality. I think her narcissistic personality shows, especially when she talks to her therapist about, I get tired of these students who they just, they sleep through this good teaching, and it's in a derogatory tone. When she talked about this voice that's condescending towards other people, it did not come across to me as a legitimate auditory hallucination, but more so maybe some narcissistic traits and condescension towards others. In her journal, she talks about, well, when you read this one day, maybe I'll make the nuclear bomb. Not that I plan to, but she saw herself as this child genius that she described based on her school records, which I agree with. She might be. You'd need intellectual testing to formally prove that, but her grades certainly suggest that she's very talented and gifted. But the cluster B traits, the most important one is the borderline. So borderline personality and bipolar disorder commonly get confused. Commonly. This, because both of them have the mood lability, the ups, the downs, the ups, the downs. Both of them have that, but they have a different cadence. And bipolar disorder, like I said earlier, bipolar 1, 7 days, bipolar 2, 4 days, and then depressed for 2 weeks. Importantly, in borderline personality, your mood lability can be minute to minute, hour to hour, and it's often related to the circumstances around you, and it's often seen in people some of these personality disorders are often seen in people who have experienced childhood trauma. Borderline personality disorder also traits shows cutting or self-harm. Relationships are also usually very intense with your friends. I love them. I can't live without them. And in her journal, she does talk about, couldn't go a day without them. Some of her friends. I'm so lucky to have them. There's also some devaluation. There's idolization and devaluation in your relationship. So one person you idolize, one person you can't stand. As a clinician, a provider, I often see this where they'll say, Dr. Pickett, you're the best doctor that I've ever seen. You're the only doctor who ever listens to me. But then they'll go see another doctor, or they'll come see me and I'll say, Dr. Pickett, you're the worst doctor. I hate you. I can't stand you. But this other doctor, he's the only doctor. So there's idolization. And with Carly, I believe there may have been some idolization of Ashley and devaluation of Kevin. Then borderline personality also deals with abandonment. Now, when I asked Carly about abandonment, whether that was an issue, she did not make it a big deal. But the way she describes her friendships, I would be skeptical if one of her friends were to abandon her, how she would take that. Would she start cutting more? A lot of patients will trade emotional pain for physical pain. So they'll cut. It's not an attempt to kill themselves, but it's an exchange. And so borderline traits, again, even though she has, and rage, anger, difficulty controlling your anger is another characteristic of a borderline personality. And so their relationships are often up and down, hot and cold, rocky. They can have trouble with their rage. And that was the last theme when I reviewed Dr. LPC Kirk's notes, was they had talked about anger as a secondary emotion, how to appropriately manage that. That was the day before. And so, generalized anxiety disorder, which can explain a lot of her nervousness, the restlessness, the zoning out, the sleep disturbances, and anxiety is a overwhelming theme throughout all of her most of her psychiatric records. The borderline personality disorder is much more consistent with traits. I'm not going to label an adolescent with a disorder. And the DSM-5 says, the DSM-5 TR says, all of the traits can become present as early as 12 to 13 years old. They can be present. So even though I'm reluctant, the DSM-5 TR recognizes that you can call them out, you can address them when you see them in unusual cases, which I think this is. Then I also said some psychopathic traits. And I don't use that word lightly, especially in an adolescent. But as I was reviewing her journal, where she says it's okay to be evil, when I see the callous nature in which she left her dead mother to text her next intended victim, and then even used the word honey, that is callous. And it is very concerning to me. In her journal, she often talked about, there were violent themes. I think she may have some with her friends. As I was reviewing Discovery, there's memes about violence. There's often this mix of fantasy, dark humor, and violence. I've seen a lot of memes. I won't go into them, but the callousness of which she did that. She has this superficial charm. She's charming. She's very likable. I liked her when I did the interview. I don't like saying any of these things, but I truly believe them. And so she's very charming. Manipulation. She took extensive notes about how to manipulate, and I have somewhere in here, and I can find it, it's 85 pages of some manipulative behaviors that I document. Okay, here we are. I can find that if we really need to. I'm happy
That's
to
right,
find
Dr. Pickett. I mean, based off of the evidence that you reviewed and her journals and sketchbooks, and the interviews with the other children, family, and friends, you determined that she exhibited some manipulative behavior.
I did. Real quickly, and I'll move on, I thought there was a lack of remorse. I think she has shown some remorse now?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. Tell you what, ladies and y'all hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, the jury, we've been going for a little while. I'm going to let y'all go ahead and take your afternoon restroom break.
Oh my God. Wow. He seemed, I mean, him saying all that stuff that she could have some of these cluster B traits. I said early on at the beginning of the trial, I diagnosed her. I diagnosed her as a sociopath narcissist because all the evidence was showing me that from, as it was unfolding, especially with the crap with her with her peers and stuff. She's so smart. She has anxiety against them not taking school as serious as her, and she's so damn smart. She was just very narcissistic to me. And the sociopathic part is, my thought was, I got that from visually watching her in the courtroom. Not from testimony. The narcissistic stuff I got from testimony. The sociopath I got from her when she would cry. Look, he just went through detail a little while ago on her being diabolical and getting the gun and killing her mother. Not a peep out of her. Describing the whole incident. Reliving it. She is reliving this as he's saying this. Because I know in my brain, while he's saying this, I'm visualizing what I saw in the video and going with him step by step. Especially when he said she was diabolical, where she was aware, where she looks in the kitchen to see if her mother had moved from the back of the house to the kitchen so she's not caught with what she's about to do. Right? Carly, not a peep out of her. Look at this. It's not a peep out of her. Go back and watch. If you guys are fascinated about trials, go back and watch her when she boo-hoos during the opening statements of the defense. She cried during the 911. She cried during when they were talking, when it seemed like whenever it was, oh, well, Carly this, or if it was the defense, that's when she cried. That's when she was crying. Y'all can go look at it. But he did say she has narcissistic traits. I agree. From the testimony I got, that's what I got from that. But he's saying she's a psychopath. Now, again, I'm not a doctor, but because I'm going to wrap this up. This is getting really long. And he just said she has lack of remorse. He said he went over Carly's words at the time, that she had understanding of what she had done from the text messages. She is making calculated, deliberate thought processes and talking. Oh, and texting, okay? And that the nature and the quality of what she had done, she is aware of this. This is devastating. And she is still on direct. I mean, he is still on direct. This guy. There's like what? Well, they're taking a break. But I'm going to end this video because it is long. And we will start part 6. So this is part 5, day 4. He didn't take stock in her, into Dr. Clark's analysis. Disassociation. He dismantled that all by what I just said. She couldn't be disassociated. She couldn't have been just looking at herself. She couldn't have blacked out because she did deliberate tasks. Thought, brain to body, thought process, goes, knows where the gun is in specific location, comes back, hiding the gun, aware of the camera. Peeks around the corner. Did mom come out of her room into the kitchen? Nope, mom's not there. So now, and then the way he said she scooted, I need to go rewatch it because, man, his description was just nailing it. Like he just broke it down. And I did want to hear that. I wanted to hear a psychiatrist break it down because I don't always catch things. She scooted. She didn't turn sideways and walk from the entryway, from the living room to the dining room. She was turned to where the camera's not going to see what's behind her back. And she scooted to head towards Carly's side of the house, to her room, because we know that's where she killed her mother. And when he said deliberate 2 shots in the face, that she is having to focus, shoot, she shot twice. Okay, just the 2 shots. I don't know where the 3rd shot is, guys. But he was saying that is a lot of concentration, deliberate thought process, and doing it. And all of this, his conclusion is she was diabolical at the time of the crime. She was diabolical at the time of the crime, guys. This is just incredibly devastating to the defense's whole premise that she hears voices, she blacked out, and she's had all these problems. She's bipolar. This has just destroyed it to me. He is convincing. I mean, am I an easily swayed person? I mean, because I am not a psychiatrist, but listening to the two of them and how Dr. Pickett here methodically broke this down for us to where I can understand what he is saying. Plus, he's going by the disclosure. Carly never said anything until after the murder that she had all of this stuff. Oh, and then Miss Todd leading her in the, I guess it's audio, guys. It's not video. Boo. I think it's just audio. He recorded, well, at least he recorded it. I want to hear clips of Miss Todd leading her. What were the leading questions? What was his question? And then what was Mrs. Todd's leading question? Inquiring minds want to know. Because you want to know every tidbit. I want to know everything. Bottom line is, no derealization, no out-of-body experience. He's saying no to all of this stuff. And that she is diabolical and callous in her actions. She knows who her second target is. She deliberately picks up her mother's phone, deliberately knows the passcode to get into the mother's phone. So she's doing all of these tasks, and he says, to me, as what I think I'm gathering, he's saying is that this is not the typical response of somebody who is blacked out. She is doing specific tasks that have a specific reasoning for it. And her using the word honey, pretending to be her mother, because he's going to be her victim. He is going to be her victim. Well, guys, that concludes part 5 of day 4.